Hi, my name is Julianne Cost, and in the next few minutes we're going to talk about all of the different options in the Effects Edit stack as well as the Optics options in Lightroom Mobile. I'll start by tapping on Effects. Here we've got the Clarity, Dehaze, and Vignette amount. If I move the Clarity slider over to the right, Lightroom is going to look for edges in your image, and it's going to make one side of the edge darker and the other side of the edge lighter, especially in the mid-tone values. And by doing so, it's going to trick your eye into thinking that your image is sharper. So if I double tap in order to zoom in and I move the clarity all the way over to the right, if I tap and hold, we can see a before and after, and you can see this kind of sharpening effect happening. All right, if I move the clarity slider all the way over to the left, Lightroom is doing the opposite. It's finding edges and it's decreasing the amount of contrast, which can give some kind of cool, more kind of glowing effects. But for this image, I actually want to increase the clarity a bit, and let's zoom out. Now, what will really benefit this image is the Dehaze slider, and that's because this image was photographed through multiple panes of plastic on a commercial flight. So as I move the Dehaze slider over to the right, you can see that it really kind of like cuts through that atmosphere and gives me a much more interesting image. If I move the Dehaze slider over to the left, it actually adds haze, and it's almost like adding fog between the airplane and the ground. So I just want to add a little bit of drama. I'm going to move that way over to the right. Now, if it gets too saturated, you can always use Dehaze in combination with either the color edit stack or any of the other options that you want. So for example, I could go to color and I could scroll up here a little bit and just decrease the amount of saturation a little bit in my image, and maybe take the temperature over to the right in order to see into those blue areas a little bit more. All right, so let's return back to the Effects Edit stack. If I want to add a slight vignette to this image, I can move the vignette amount to the left, which will darken the edges, or to the right, which will lighten the edges. I want to make them just a little bit darker. As soon as I apply an amount of vignette, then I have options for midpoint, so I can move that in towards the center or just on the edges. I can add an increase in my feather to soften the edges a bit, and I can make it a little bit more or less round depending on my image. I'll just double tap to reset that. And I'm going to change the style here because I think this is a little bit too much of a vignette. So I'll change it from highlight priority to color priority. Excellent. Let's swipe to move to this next image here. Now in this case, I'm going to also apply some effects. I want to start with just a little bit of clarity, but then I'm going to add a little bit of color using the split tone effect. So to the right of clarity here, I'll tap in order to access the split tone options, and this is going to allow me to add color in my shadows and highlights. And even though this image is almost monochromatic, I'm going to leave it in color and just add a little bit more color. Now I could do something really dramatic where I could say add maybe some blues in my shadows and then some yellows in my highlights and get kind of this cross-process effect if I wanted to, but it's just not quite the look that I'm after for this image. I want kind of a warmer look. So instead of using blues in my shadows, I'm going to bring this down to more in the red or orange areas here, and I'm going to decrease the amount of saturation so it's a little bit more subtle, and I'll do the same up here for the yellows. And you'll notice that the red dot here that shows where I'm tapping and the circle, the red dot is offset so I can actually pick a color. If the place I was tapping was right on top of that circle, well then it'd be hard to pick a color. So I'm just going to bring this over to the yellows, but not too far because I don't want it to go towards those greens. All right, and I'm just going to move my shadows a little bit more towards red. All right, now, if I want to control where Lightroom shifts between the highlights and shadows, I can use the balance slider. So if I move the balance slider over to the left, you can see that most of the yellow in the highlights actually goes away and the image becomes much more red. And if I scoot it over to the right, now I'm seeing a lot more yellow in my image and not as much red. So I actually want a little bit more red, and I just think my amount of color is a little bit too much in both of those, so I'm going to decrease the amount there and shift the balance over a little bit more to the left. All right, now I'll tap on the split tone icon in order to hide that. And let's move over to the optics options for one moment. In this case, the enable lens correction is turned on, and the reason it's turned on by default is because that's what I have the preference set. So if we back out of here and we go back to the main screen, if I tap on the Lightroom icon and we scoot down to import, for lens profile, the default is to enable corrections for raw files, and since this was a raw file to begin with, it will automatically apply the correct lens correction profile in order to remove any distortions caused by that lens. I can also toggle this on for all files, but in this case I'm going to leave it to raw only. So as you can see, using the effects panel in Lightroom Mobile can really provide some great effects, whether it's adding clarity or removing or adding dehaze and split toning. And of course, if you're a member of Creative Cloud Complete or the Creative Cloud for Photography plan, any of the edits that you make in Lightroom Mobile will be synchronized across all of your devices, including Lightroom on the desktop. My name's Julianne Cost. Thanks for watching.